So last week we talked about, change overall and what that means. And I said this week we talk about our life here on the planet and what that means for change. And I kept coming back to when I was really young, we had this children's Bible. I actually tried to find the Bible, but it must be at my parents' house and not my house like I thought, because I couldn't find it. But it would open continually to this picture of David and Goliath, because I could not get enough of that story, or that there was this drawing, gorgeous drawing, I remember, of David and Goliath. And it kept coming back to me with this idea of change, this image of resilience, of being powerful against anything. And in case you don't know the story of David and Goliath, David was like low totem pole in the birth rank of sons, right? So he's doing the quote menial tasks and taking care of the sheep and all of that. And through his efforts with that, he had been up against wolves and lions, and he had learned to take care of himself and his flock and do all the errands for his older brothers and his dad on top of it. The fast forward in the story, and there's a war. Of course, there's always a war. Why do we get stories without a war? No, but there's a war, and the big old warrior, Goliath, is the champion for the opposing team. And he says, you know what? You guys can be slaves or you can beat me. Pick one. So there's an opportunity for change right here. That's the change point. We get to choose the path, like we talked about last week. Which path are we going to choose? Are we going to decide fear and be a slave? Or are we going to stand up to the bully and take care of it? And even though David's low on the totem pole, everybody else was too afraid. The whole army, they're all afraid. They're not going to go touch that with anything, because what if they fail? And the story goes, they try to dress David in armor, but it didn't feel right for him. And he's like, no, I know what I can do. I know who I am. I don't need your stuff on top of me to be okay. I got this. And now some of the pictures, you see this, he goes out with a sling and 5 stones. That's the story. He goes and picks 5 stones and a sling. And sometimes you see the stories and it's this itty bitty teeny weeny sling, but no, slings were deadly weapons. If you learned how to use that, you could take care of just about anything. So first, for me, that sling is that symbol of that power that we each carry. It looks like maybe not so much sometimes, but if we learn about it and we learn how to use it, it's super powerful. And then 5 little rocks. Well, rocks are earth, right? Rocks are right from the earth, and rocks are our senses and our experience, and there's 5 of them. So if we take the symbology of the rocks as everything that makes us human, right? Everything that creates us in our experience and how we sift through that experience, and how we're willing to come up against a challenge in all of our senses. So little David goes out with his sling and big old Goliath. Now, in the picture I had in my children's Bible, Goliath was like, well, a monster from the mountains. It's like this huge person. David's like 2 feet tall. I'm sure it wasn't quite like that, but if you have that kind of image, that something seems insurmountable. And the story goes, David took the sling, took one of his rocks, and whomped that guy in the head. And he went down. Now, if we take, and that it's neat that neat. Of course, he's going to hit him in the head. Where else would he hit him with a rock in order to bop him down, right? But our head is all of that fear. I don't know that we manifest fear and anxiety in our hearts. It's all that overthinking, right? It's that thinking part. And if we whack that and learn to be with our instincts and our feelings that our senses give us. Right? That's where that power is in everything that makes us us through spirit, and not that overthinking part. So if you get rid of that head part, right, the rest of it comes more clear. It's amazing how a story from like when I was 4 to 10 that I couldn't get enough of solidifies like my entire existence. I'm trying to get over that whatever obstacle, because I was never really good with change ever. That especially younger. That was like the most fearful thing in the world, is to have something shift from where it was. I remember when we moved, I was 9, 10 years, 4th grade. I was going in the 4th grade, however old that is. And I thought my world had come to an end, you know, and not only were we, the plus part about it is we lived in a mobile home, and they literally took the house with us to the new, to the new location. So in some way, it was a little bit of a blessing for me, because there was some comfort there that not everything had changed. But they killed my favorite lilac tree to get that house out of there. You know, we had to put my dog in another place because the new place didn't allow dogs, and it was an outside dog. So you couldn't have a dog run around outside. I mean, all these, and it's crazy that I remember stuff like that in complete detail, because it was just changed like crazy. And yet I kept reading this story. I wish I could have pieced it together when I was 9. I can piece it together now. But that was really, I think, one of the reasons I was so drawn to it, because we don't have to be afraid of change. You know, Goliath is change, and David is our ability to feel it and deal with it and move anyway. There's a New Yorker article from February of 2016. It was written by Maria Konnikovia. Hope I pronounced her name right. And it talks about the keys to resilience and the perceptions that we have with resilience. And it's based on her article is based on the work of Norman Garmez. And unfortunately, he didn't get to finish this study because he was afflicted with Alzheimer's before he got totally done. But his crew took over and was able to finish his work. And they followed people over like a 30-year span, which is incredible to think about, you know, in terms of what makes us resilient. And they started with these people before birth. So they actually had these people, they actually tracked if there were certain changes in the pregnancy and things like that. And the conclusion, I'm going to skip right to the conclusion because the article is quite long. But the conclusion for all this study is, and I'm going to quote here, the good news is that the positive outlook on change can be taught. We can make ourselves more or less vulnerable by how we think of things. And isn't that thinking brain? We go right back to that imagery of Bob and Goliath in the head. How do we think of things? So in the research, neuroscientist Kevin Oshner has shown that teaching people to think of stimuli in different ways, to reframe them in positive terms when the initial response is negative, or in a less emotional way, when the initial response is emotionally, hot or really charged, changes how they experience and react to the stimulus, how we perceive, how we recognize those impulses in our senses, right, can change the way we make our choices, can create ways in which we better regulate so that we make choices that are not based on fear, and to recognize that every day is a place of change, really, every day. How we handle stress says a lot. And I'm going to go back. This is a quote from a friend of mine a long time ago. When my first husband left, I was left with the 4 and the 6-year-old and trying to figure out how to live. That was my state of mind at the time, or at least the circumstances. And my one friend said to me, how we handle stress says a lot about a person. And she says, and I can't handle your true self right now. That has stuck with me a really long time. And I don't know that that's totally true. You know, I think sometimes how we as outsiders handle somebody in those situations may be more telling. Because if resilience can be taught, right, we have the opportunity to stand in that place of reflection for anybody that is moving towards that fear realm or breaking down or not even being able to make choices. And that, I'm going to lean into some research done by Dr. Ken Ginsberg, and you can find, he's pretty prevalent, so you can find him if you want to know more. I'm just going to do a real quick overview. He talks about the 7 C's of resilience. And he's mostly talking about children and adolescents, because he puts the adults in a position to mirror these 7 C's to them. And what if we did that to each other as adults and not just to children? You know, then we wouldn't be putting a positive or a negative on somebody's reaction to stress, but we would be mirroring ways in which maybe we can help them through it. And it's something to do all the time. It's not just like in the moment, because we're talking about children, we're talking about a long term, right? Helping them through the years so that when they get to adulthood. And the 7 are all C's. One is competence, to make sure that we know that we are able, that we have the sling, right? We have our own version of power. We are competent to be able to do things, and the confidence to do so, to build each other's confidence up. So when we have a friend or somebody in a crisis situation, they don't think they can handle it. Well, how do we build the confidence? How do we show them where their sling is, right? That they can use it. It's connection. It's a caring friend, family member, community member that circles the wagons, right? That connection with each other. It's been so hard the last couple of years, I think, right? We don't know what connection to make or what not, or is it safe or isn't. And yet, to be resilient, we need to make some kind of connection. It's character, it's self-worth and self-esteem. And again, if somebody's in that crisis, or even if we are, where are we pulling our self-worth from? Are we recognizing it from within in that light that we all have? You know, or are we trying to grab it from some external place, or thinking that it's just not there at all? The 5th C is contribution. Hearing thank yous and appreciation from others. In order to have each other be resilient, we recognize when people do good things. We say thank you. You know, we smile, we put that world in a better place. We say the world is a better place because you're in it, and we recognize your contribution to it. The 6th C is coping. It's stress reduction skills. It's our personal practice. It's our rituals, our meditations, our nature, the food we eat. My children and myself, there are sensitivities in the food realm for us. And they have learned if they don't eat the way their body would like them to eat, they don't cope with anything very well. It's an amazing thing to realize about your body. But even to recognize that about ourselves and to share that with each other. And control, to know that we each have control, even when it seems like we don't, that we all have the ability to make a choice. Do we know we can do it and grab our sling and meet Goliath? Or do we go and hide and pretend that Goliath isn't there and hope he and his army just go away? You know, which is it? It's resilience. Resilience. I know I read you the poem last week, but I'm going to read it again. Maybe. Oh, guess what? I must have used a different notebook last night. So I'll just say the last line, and that is that I traveled the one less traveled by. That I chose the path that maybe didn't look so pretty, but it was the right one that I felt was for me. And we each have that ability, each and every day. Each and every day. Thank you.